Take me out to the ball game. Take me out to the crowd. Buy me some peanuts and Cracker Jack. I don't care if I ever get back. Oh, it's root for the Cubbies. If they don't win, it's a shame. For it's 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out at the old ball game. Hey!
This is the Monday Morning Quarterback on the 22nd of January, 2018. Brought to you by WBRN Radio in Boston and on the Boston Red Network. Very interesting here. The Super Bowl is set, and of course we are boycotting the NFL. The Patriots are in. They've been there before. And the Eagles of Philadelphia are also there. That will be the matchup. Millions of dollars will be spent, in our opinion, frivolously, on extravagance for the elite primarily. There will be some for ordinary people events, as they have the Super Bowl in the dead winter out in the Midwest city of Minneapolis. It'd be very interesting at best, building perhaps ice castles on the way and various other types of accompaniment there. We'll start this off with the shutdown. The shutdown is now in its third day, and it moves along. There were some compromises put up there, but they were really not compromises. Nancy Pelosi basically said it all was a gag, as we used to say in the 50s, and no proposals there. Old man McConnell didn't actually promise to bring immigration up, and he knows better than that. But look at the practical side of it. The government is shuttered, and it's shuttered for the third day. The Democrats would be fools to not let this particular shutdown amount to political capital. Not going in for a 3 or 4 day gag, but to get a final deal. In other words, a debt deal that will be a comprehensive deal and comprehensive on all areas. Immigration, etc., the Children's Health Fund, and other vital things. In other words, it'd be a permanent deal, not a 2-week or 1 month or 3-day deal. That's a waste of time. They've already had time to do this. The Republicans have dragged their feet and now let it stay as it is. This is an article here from the Washington Post by Michael DeBonis. Anyway, with DJ Trump largely hidden from the public view during the shutdown. I guess DJ Trump doesn't want to take ownership of this, although he has it. His henchman, Mulvaney, he is with the White House Office of Management and Budget. He's the person tasked to take care of this. It's a sharp reversal from Mulvaney's role when the government last shut down 5 years ago. That's when he was a Congress type from South Carolina. Helped trigger the closure by leading Republicans' rebellion against the GOP leadership during a fight over the Affordable Care Act. I might have a lot of sympathy if I hadn't been accused at the time of being an arsonist, he told reporters Saturday, but keep in mind, this is different. He's a liar. Said in an interview Sunday that the government should continue providing services even amidst the congressional impasse, and he accused of the Obama administration of weaponizing the 2013 shutdown, closing high-profile parks, monuments to pressure Republicans to agree. He mentioned the national monuments in Washington that were kept open on Saturday and how these monuments allow a large number of protesters to demonstrate. Well, yeah. Mulvaney's critics see a more nefarious motive, accusing the budget director of spreading funds to create false impressions. that the government shutdown doesn't matter, as well as to mask the importance of government's role in public life. The White House, they note, is focusing some of its efforts to blunt the shutdown on things that have big public exposure, such as national parks. But willy-nilly, the workers are still at home. Real right-wingers like Mulvaney want to demonstrate that they aren't really real-life consequence to government shutdowns for most average Americans, and they are going to minimize that pain. That's from Gerald Conley, a Democrat whose Virginia district outside of D.C. would be heavily hit by furloughs of federal workers, which is going on. This is a cynical strategy to try to persuade the public that the government shutdown really isn't a shutdown. It's all part of Orwellian approach to messaging and governance that we haven't seen in the Trump era, he says. Mulvaney is no stranger to political fisticuffs that often seems to revere in them. During the current shutdown, he has made more than a dozen media appearances, prodding Senate Democrats to vote for government funding, but acting as if he'd be perfectly capable of continuing to run the government if they don't. Democrats are withholding support from funding, part to force concessions on immigration, seeking protection for undocumented immigrants who were brought here as children. The Air Force Academy canceled all athletic events over the weekend, while the Naval Academy did not. The Statue of Liberty was set to close until the state of New York stepped in. The Everglades National Park, that's in Florida, has remained open, although the park rangers are home. Visitors have been warned to use extreme caution around the alligators. They want to be eaten up, and that'll be a big situation there. Cheer the decision to keep operating the Armed Forces Network that is broadcast NFL games to soldiers. The Environmental Protection Agency will stay open for at least next week, even though it saw major restrictions during the 2013 shutdown. Many conservatives have applauded Mulvaney so far. Obviously, the last time the shutdown happened, there were barricades, etc., at monuments. That's from right-wing Meadows. He's from North Carolina. And so they didn't happen in a small area. Mulvaney is at ease during partisan brawls and doesn't hesitate to throw punches at Democrats. Well, no doubt about it. But you see, part of the problem here, you cannot negotiate with a boxer that's trying to put you in a corner. That is defining any type of logic. And the problem that the Democrats have with the so-called moderates, these moderates are just that. Moderates are conservative Democrats in a period that the conservative Democrat is an animal that is being more extinct. Now, what does this mean to the body politic? What it means is, unfortunately, that areas like Missouri that have moved more to the right until it moves back more to the center will have right-wing representation. That is just simply it. Now, some of the smaller states out there, Montana, they are doing their best to get grassroots activity. That is one of the bright spots that came out of the Women's March 2.0. The emphasis on grassroots organizing and the de-emphasis on just electing politicians to do our bidding. But we as citizens of the United States must do our own bidding collectively. So grassroots organizations become much more important than ever before. And this is good for the so-called American democracy. It will become more of, quote-unquote, a democracy and not a Salazar-type setup that is run by business. And this is what you have with the Trump administration. We'll go to an article in the Financial Times shortly here on the World Economic Forum and why Trump wants to appear there and disgrace the United States. Because the World Economic Forum, which we will cover starting here in a day or so. The whole idea there is globalized economics. Now, we've also covered the protests that are around it. The whole idea of globalized economies is in how they are globalized. Are they globalized for people, or are they globalized for the financial interests? That's a very big situation. We were looking at a J.P. Morgan healthcare conference of all things, and some of the speakers that they had there were all right-wingers. They even had that, what's his name? Carlson is his last name, the right-wing pundit that used to be, Tucker Carlson, used to be on PBS of all places. He was there. So in other words, when you start looking at, this is the largest conference, had 10,000 people. When you start looking at these various conferences and who some of the keynote speakers are, you understand the ideological thrust of that conference. So this is what you have here. This is bigger than, say, a few Democrats, quote-unquote, being centrist or conservative Democrats. They have outlived their usefulness to the party. Now, this is something the party has to make a decision. What to do in Indiana, very tenuous situation there. You have a placeholder there in the Sheriff Donnelly. But is Donnelly able to actually come up with anything that's productive for the party as a whole? It's the same situation. Claire McCaskill has been productive in the past, and we can understand this situation. Whereas out in North Dakota with Heidi Handicap, that is a different situation out there because it's a sparse state. It has 2 senators and 1 representative. And basically the same thing in Montana. So you have to look at other opportunities. Arizona, for instance, is ripe. And there are other opportunities out there also. What do we do in Tennessee? Can we get a grassroots organization going in Tennessee, in the Alleghenies there? Quite possible. In the Ozark Mountains, it's quite possible to happen. So we have to look in different ways to get things done. But as far as this race to open the government, it's preposterous and it's silly. The Democrats just have to hold where they are and get the most bang for their buck. Now let me move on here. And we'll pick up on the Financial Times, then we'll go to payday loans. This is from the public people here, news service. So we have them both here. Some balance, but not for balance as people would go. Anyway, nonetheless, this is by Rachman here, Gideon Rachman. Anyway, when the World Economic Forum assembles in Davos, last year the delegates were in shock. Trump had been elected as president, the U.S. and Britain had recently voted for Brexit. Globalization, study integration of trade, markets, and governance is embraced as invincible and desirable by most of the people. He calls them crowd at Davos. Yet these ideas seem on the siege in the Trump-Brexit era. Steve Bannon, who was about to enter the White House as a senior advisor for DJ Trump, had styled his ideological enemies the Party of Davos. A year later, the move of business people, financial, political, and public intellectuals at Davos is likely to be rather different. Bannon is a non-persona in the White House. He's been disgraced even by his own gang at Breitbart. Trump himself, meanwhile, is expected to speak, the first time a U.S. president has shown up since Bill Clinton. It's interesting. Barack Obama was not there, which was a good thing. Markets are setting new records against a background of strengthening economic growth, which will doubtlessly mean many delegates arrive in the Swiss mountains resort in a good humor. The president's speech is set to be the forum's centerpiece, and he is likely to decide this is the moment to make peace with Davos, or play to his home base, reasserting his populist credentials by taking the fight to the global elite. Well, the problem here is this quasi-capitalist DJ Trump represents the dirty side of capitalism, and this is the problem. This will be more on Davos. The sense is that it's a genuine courtship of Davos is strengthened by the number of senior members of the administration accompanying him. They include Steve Mnuchin, Treasury Secretary Rex Tillerson. Well, Rex Tillerson has been there before when he was at Exxon, is already more relaxed about Trump than it was 12 months ago. Sure, Trump is a traditional capitalist type of president. Figure to deliver on some of his incendiary pledges, such as imposing tariffs on Chinese goods. Trump has also pointed to big cuts in corporate tax, which usually go down well with the business audience, no doubt about that. The thing to remember about this, and we've been covering the World Economic Forum, there are negative things, obviously, about the World Economic Forum, and there are some positive things. Dr. Klaus has done some, and he's the guy that founded the World Economic Forum. Is keen to welcome Trump, co-opting difficult political figures is the name of the Davos game, an organization that has in the past rolled out red carpets for such diverse figures as the president of the Russian Federation. Iran is eager to embrace Trump. Klaus Schwab, a longtime president and CEO, is an expert in flattery, and Trump is known to respond well to it. An important factor in persuading Trump to attend was that the star of last year's Davos was President Xi of China. Mr. Xi took the opportunity to position China as a champion of free trade, telling a delighted audience that pursuing protectionism is like locking yourself in a dark room, a dig at Trump's America First. Now, this is a basic ideological problem for DJ Trump. How does he reconcile his America First campaign and international gathering? If he goes there to present America First, he just presents America First. He runs diametrically opposed to this business tint, so to speak. The Chinese lady who appeared at Swiss Mountain Resort also sparked skepticism amongst the multinational executives concerned about what many see as a growing difficulty of doing business in China over the past year. This feeling is likely to have grown. The 19th Party Congress, which we also covered, has moved China to increasingly a personified form of government revolving around President Xi. The Made in China 2025 program focuses on the industries of tomorrow, also whereas Western companies which fear they will be competing increasingly with state-favored Chinese national champions. Concerned about Chinese business and trade practices give Trump an opening if he can persuade the audience that all he is doing is demanding a playing field there. The problem is he can demand a playing field all he wants. But if the Communist Party of China, they have already put forth a program, he can play on that field, or as the minister from Chicago, Minister Louis Farrakhan, said, leave it alone. Those attending also went on to say exactly how Trump intends to advance his trade agenda. His administration decided to persuade China through the WTO. It might find support for the EU, but if the U.S. looks as if it's trying to go around the World Trade Organization or even actively undermine it, the reception is likely to be a lot cooler. China is not the only country the U.S. president regards as bad on trade. He has complained about Japan, Germany, Korea, Canada, and Mexico. If he's inclined to take on all these countries, he risks creating an anti-U.S. coalition. Until Trump decides to make an appearance, it seems likely that the star attraction will be Mr. Macron, Emmanuel Macron, whose victory in France. Now, this Macron character is nothing more than a centrist himself. President Macron is a former banker who is committed to liberalizing reforms of French economy, but also has a progressive social attitude. He is a graduate of France's leading educational institutions and speaks fluent English. No doubt. In other words, President Macron tickles every Davos box. In a decade time, he'll find himself out of power in France. It's not hard to see him popping up the coffee bar in the Congress Center at the head of a big corporation or international organization. Well, no doubt. But things are changing. The fact that the euro crisis has died down there is a strong growth in the eurozone. Means delegates are more optimistic about Europe than they were for some years. Even there are some background concerns, a long delay in forming a new government in Germany has alarmed those who had hoped the Merkel-Macron partnership could relaunch the euro. The politics of other euro big types, Italy, Spain has Carlona, and Poland's on a right-wing regime. The UK has come in with very weak sales results over the holiday season. Are unsettling for the rest of Europe. Italy has an election in March in which populist and Euro-skeptic parties could make a significant gain. Spain, as we talked about, a constitutional crisis with Catalona, politicians still in jail, charged with sedition. The Polish government has formally been accused by the European Commission of undermining the rule of law. Britain faces 18 months of bruising Brexit's negotiation on certain economic future in a weak nation. Events on the EU borders are potentially destabilizing refugee crisis, Ukrainian conflict, which could be settled. V.I. Putin kept away from Davos in 2009, but with Russia about to host the World Football World Cup, it'll be using this year to gauge the scope for rehabilitation, he's calling it here. And the remains expert at creating the right mixture of excitement to the World Economic Forum and easiness required to convince delegates they are truly shaping the world. The idea of elite-driven globalization, however, is much more contested than a decade ago. Trump's speech will well give a strong sign, however Davos era may be coming to a close. Well, Trump's speech or not will have very little effect. If he goes there with his America First program, he will have absolutely no effect at all. If he goes there talking about corporate tax relief, which he brought on, that will do for some, but it doesn't solve the underlying problems that Trump has. At the center of his program is his white supremacist program, and nations would be very smart to bring that up because this is a world forum. And I'm not certain if he will take any questions there or not, but if he does, that should be up there, and I would not doubt, obviously outside there would be demonstrations against DJ Trump. and this whole nationalistic attitude that DJ Trump has. During the shutdown, he's been hiding. What that means is, when there's a real crisis, as Harry Truman would say, and the buck stops at the desk, DJ Trump's nowhere to be seen. He's hiding under the desk like a 5-year-old child. So this is one of the things that we confront here. He can send all this fool Mulvaney out there all he wants, but they can't cover this up. The government is shut down. 800,000 workers, for the most part, are furloughed. They're at home, and they will be at home. If they gave an extension, that's just silly putty, because trying to bring the government back, there are already millions of dollars lost. It just cannot be simply done that way. They need to move and get this debt agreement on a permanent basis and forget about it. Until that's done, there's going to be problems, no doubt about it. Let me just jump back over here a little bit to the Public News Service and an article. Again, this is the Trump administration. Gifts to payday loan lenders. Out of Tallahassee, Florida. Payday lending industry has filed its first bill in the Florida legislature in 2 decades as it tries to fight federal consumer protection rules made during the Obama administration. Other lenders could be getting some help from the Trump administration. The new leaders at the Consumer Protection Agency, they will delay imposing new rules for short-term, high-interest loans, commonly known as payday loans. Alice Vickers, director of the Florida Alliance of Consumer Protection, says she thinks it's part of an effort to rescind the Bureau's more aggressive regulations. I am assuming that this is pretty much a gift to the payday lending industry, and these rules are going to be severely eroded in terms of consumer protection that we hoping they would provide. Meanwhile, Florida legislators, which have been gerrymandered, they have started moving forward with proposals to revamp payday lending rules in the state, allowing consumers to borrow larger amounts of money over longer periods of time. About 10 years ago, I helped a young woman with a bankruptcy petition, and one of the things in the bankruptcy petition was a $400 payday loan. The payday lending industry has filed legislation to evade the Consumer Protection Bureau rules and to create a product that would be outside the reach of Consumer Protection Agency rules on short-term loans. As she said, Vickers said, no one knows what if any new rule will come from under Mulvaney. Oh boy. But in Florida, payday loan legislation, that is House Bill 857, heads to its last committee stop, and an identical version is SB 920 is moving ahead in the Senate. No doubt it is. And this is one of the things this is why we use the Public News Service. We would not have this out of Tallahassee, Florida, and what is going on down there. We get community level news, and we're most glad, obviously, to get it. What else do we have here? Farm co-ops gets boost in a new tax law, but it will stick. The latest addition to the tax law passed in December could give North Dakota, this is from North Dakota, farmer co-ops a boost, but will lawmakers keep it around? It's out of North Dakota. Bismarck, known as a Section 99A, it would add to the tax bill, added to the tax bill last minute to preserve a deduction that allows farmers to deduct up to 20% of their total sales to cooperatives. Cooperatives and independently owned agricultural companies have says that it hurts their business with deduction that aren't relatively high. Oh, corporations. Sorry about that. The president of the North Dakota Farm Union said that these businesses would be in bad shape because they receive tax cuts in other places. If they are an independent, not a corporation, they have their rates come down, which they can certainly share with their customers some way. He points out, if they're incorporated, they'll have the right to share the 35% to down to 21%. That's the federal law. Section 999A was an attempt to replace another tax provision known as 99. It was originally passed as a job creating measure, and revised version expected to do the same. Watney says farmers are part of user consumer co-ops see the benefits of this model. Their bottom line, farmers, if they do business with cooperatives and if they have ownership of that corporation, you'll get some of the earnings back to you. If you do business with a private business that does not share some of their profits back with you, then there's less potential for earnings. The U.S. Senator there and other lawmakers say they are working on a solution that would restore Section 99. Anyway, I'm not sure. This is part of the gridlock there. So, in other words, this would be good for the cooperative movement in North Dakota. And let's see what else we can pick up here. This is out of Boise, Idaho. This is Medicaid expansion initiative begin signature drive. This is in Idaho. Groups that want to expand Medicaid and coverage of 78,000 uninsured Idahoans have begun collecting signatures for the November ballot. Despite other state level efforts to cover folk without insurance, the Butch Otter, who recently proposal would help about 35,000 Idahoans become eligible for coverage through federal waivers. Luke Merville, co-founder of Reclaim Idaho, the group that launched the Medicaid expansion ballot initiative, says Otter's plan is a good start, but doesn't go far enough. Maysville maintains that the federal government is moving backward by allowing states to impede requirements for Medicaid as they're doing in Kentucky under Blevin. It provides something of an alternative for our campaign to really draw a sharp contrast between what our lawmakers in Washington and Boise are doing. Meanwhile, Maryville, also criticized Otter's executive order in January that allows Idaho health plans to drop some affordable care minimal requirements such as contraceptive coverage and maternity. Maternity is very, very important. Mayville said Idahoans in the Medicaid gap often make too much to qualify for Medicaid, but not enough for the subsidies on the state exchange. He recounts a story he had heard many times when launching the Reclaimed Idaho campaign. When I had Medicaid, I had good insurance. He relates, but then I went out and got a job, and by getting a job, I lost my health care because I then made too much to qualify for Medicaid. Merrillville says saving taxpayers' money is a key feature of the expansion. He points out that Idahoans already pay federal taxes that help other states expand Medicaid. In a neighboring Montana, where they expanded Medicaid 18 months ago, they have saved the state budget $30 million. He points out that's what we are trying to do for Idaho, save taxpayers money. To qualify as an initiative to get on the ballot, 6% of the registered voters, excuse me, in 18 districts, roughly 48,000 Idahoans, and that's by May Day or May 1st, they have to get this. And you'll see our picture down there, Medicaid for Idaho, the expansion group. That's in 18 districts, so they do have quite a job ahead of them. Let me move around here a little bit. We had a story. I think we pointed out the Senate had adjourned, vote postponed until noon on Monday. Well, this is just jackassery, as they would say. Our respected institution upset the first Black History Teacher of the Year in Massachusetts. Kevin Dua, D-U-A, I'm not sure I pronounced his name right, was a 2017 History Teacher of the Year in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, the first African-American educator to win the award in the state, but right now he is thrilled with the people who gave him the honor. In 2016, he taught at Cambridge Ridge and Latin School, a public high school, after spending 5 years in Somerville, that's near Boston. He received numerous awards, including the 2017 Delta Cap alumni honoree from Williams and Mary, the 2017 Massachusetts Council for Social Studies, Dan Vicenci Award for Excellence in Promoting Civic Education, and the Kathleen Roberts Creative Award, that was in 2017, at the MIT Human Rights Awards. Learned in June of 2017 that he had been named a Teacher of the Year in Massachusetts from Gilder Lehman Institute of American History. Since 2004, the Institute annually picks winners in every state and territory, then selects a finalist, which was won last year, who compete for National History Teacher of the Year. The winner was Sarah Simnek of Rock River High School in Ohio. Gilder Lehman Institute of American History is a highly respected history nonprofit, serves K through 12 schools and general public through programs, etc. Never heard of it before. Includes James McPherson of Princeton and Joseph Ellis of Mount Hoyle College, as well as filmmaker Burns. Dewar said he asked the Institute why there was a white male teacher on the flyer. Tim Bradley, Director of Education at the Gilder Lehman Institute of History, told him in email, "You're correct. This was a generic photo used for all, 54 states and territories that came from past promotional material." Durr went public with a disappointing tweet: "When you're the first black to win the Massachusetts Teacher of the Year award, and you see that the 18 applicants for the Mass History Award feature a white person from a different state, it hurts as a black male educator." No doubt about it. It was disrespectful of an African American here. I asked Dawn about his response. He said in an email that he knows some people will not understand why he was upset, though some may perceive it as a reaction, as race baiting, irrelevant, or overreaction. He wrote, the reality is that the profession where only 7% of public school teachers in the U.S. are African Americans. Every acknowledgement, even on a flyer, benefits and retention and recruitment. Beta responded to inquiries about the incident, writing an email. First, let's say that we are grateful that Kevin brought the flyer to our attention. I hope so. And unintended offenses are the most difficult to address because they are not brought to your attention. We value Kevin's expertise and insights as a master teacher. I hope so. We also value our relation with him, not only the 2017 Massachusetts History Teacher of the Year, but as a national finalist. Kevin has highlighted a national issue that we are aware of for many years. There is a pronounced lack of diversity amongst teachers in history classes in the U.S. Dual story in his own words from an email he sent me. I've received an email from the Gilda Lehman Institute of America under the heading Nominees Open for Education, attached email with the flyer. I chose to share the photo for social media because it's a representation matter, not just to me personally, but important to minority students or people of color. I remember reading in the Boston Globe article this past summer, students are increasingly diverse, but the teachers are not. And this is a national problem that's been happening, particularly in many what used to be called inner city urban school environments, that the schools are becoming more and more of color, and the teachers left over from prior years of 5-10 years are Europeans. So in other words, there is a total mismatch in the people teaching and administrating and the people there. So like a prison. Teachers are not. That starts, say, minorities account for 37% of the Commonwealth's public enrollment in public school enrollment in 2015, 2016, and only 7.1% of the teaching staff were minorities. That's a lot of people thrown in. I recall this past October how fortunate I was to represent my school, Cambridge Ridge Latin, in the district, Cambridge Public Schools, as a presenter at Stay Woke, the inaugural national black male educators convening in Philadelphia, where 500 plus black male educators gathered with their theme of celebrating, supporting, and advocating for African American teachers. These are reasons why I shared the photo on social media, and it should have been shared, and is a missed opportunity to showcase a teacher of color. We obviously don't. What we don't want to do here is come up with some sort of scheme of pandering. That is not the idea here. Attached piece flying the nomination flyer for Massachusetts Teacher of the Year, and nominal teachers from both Teacher of the Year and History Teacher of the Year here. So these are some of the things. Nominations are open for the Presidential Award for Excellence in Mathematics and Science Teaching to nominate there. Please disseminate these flyers in your school, period. Thanks. Have a great day. Science and math teachers are very, very important. And Mr. Kevin Dua, D-U-A, I think is how, is here. He was last year's History Teacher of the Year in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. But yet when the flyer came out, they put a European image there. That is not unusual. Many times that is a deliberate situation that takes place. So we've pretty much been around the horn here, going back to much of the news, starting with the Washington Post, going to the Public News Service, moving on to the Financial Times. So what we've done is we've come up with a well-rounded view today. We didn't have the talk shows today. Part of the reason was Mulvaney and some of the people we covered were on the talk shows, and basically we covered the same talking points just there. At Reuters, government workers awake to shutdown, notices all around. Period. The state of New York takes up funding to keep the Statue of Liberty open. Trust in U.S. institutions plunge in Trump's first year. I think we need to get this one on here. Trust in U.S. institutions, particularly the government, has plunged. That's the Edelman Trust Barometer. Annual Edelman Trust Barometer shows trust in the four institutions and measures government, business, etc. There, Trump has broken with presidential tradition and repeatedly denounced media judiciary there. So nothing new there. Fake news comes up, etc. So, again, we are not surprised at that at all. Now, this is an item here. U.S. sanctions curb Microsoft sales to hundreds of firms in the Russian Federation, to more than 200 firms following new sanctions there. With much of the focus around U.S. sanctions has been the way they skirted the moves by the Russian distributors, show how tough restrictions that have come into force on November 28th start to bite. Measures that cut the duration of loans that can be offered to Russian financial firms from to 14 days from 30 and 60 days. Routine Russian suppliers to wait weeks or even months to get paid after submitting invoices for services and goods. Microsoft said in a statement, Microsoft has strong commitment to complying with legal requirements, no doubt about that. And Microsoft lists 9 other official distributors of its main software products in Russia. The same category there. Well, they'll be replaced to not respond to the questions, but software produced by Microsoft had been acquired by state organizations and firms in Russia and Crimea, despite the sanctions. In case several others open there. The solution there is get the Microsoft out of their situation. A second list known as the Sector Sanctions Identification List covers 224 mostly Russian firms and their subsidiaries in the banking, energy, and defense sector. Tougher rules there. Notification from Microsoft distributors. That was on the 29th of November. For the defense sector, it said orders would be fulfilled only if the partner commit payments would be within the 30 days of the licensing agreement. Well, the Russian Federation would be well advised not to have Microsoft products there. They'll see DJ Trump's smiling face coming out of their desktop. Even Chinese companies started to ask, said someone close to the Kremlin, but some Chinese companies have until now continued to do, even where many Western companies have pulled back. Well, they have nothing to move, and this is very interesting in the shadow of Davos. What's happening? People who work closely with a billionaire Russian oligarch said he assessed the risks of the oligarch's business would be put under U.S. sanctions was only 10%. Was a big-time oligarch. The financial ministry source said he expects an uptick in the number of shell companies being set up as mechanisms to bypass the sanctions. Well, they need to look at this and look at it very, very carefully. Let me just check the BBC here. There was one other item I wanted to bring up. I don't know. We'll have it. From the BBC here, the regular machinations with in Germany, the SPD backs Merkel's coalition talks. They're still trying to get a working coalition going there. The world's rich 1% get 82% of the wealth. I guess this is a good way of setting up Davos. Here, this is from Oxfam. And we'll have to put this up here. It's unacceptable. Chief there, Max Golding said there. So again, this is 82% of the wealth. So there's only 18% left for the rest of us. Let's go now to do the sports. Been traveling along here on. Tomorrow it will mark 10 years that Boston Red has been in the business. 10 long years, over 2,600 episodes for Boston Red, and 56, 57, I believe. A long, long time, no doubt about it, that we've been in the business here. Million plus, I think 1,600,000, 1,700,000 people have come to see us on the Boston Red Network. And in addition to Boston Red, we have a Numbers Man, which has 400 and about 40 programs there. We have the Open Source Report and Boston Red on the World. So there's a number of other productions here. So in all, we have over 3,000 productions out there. You can find those on iHeart, Spreaker. Some are still left at Blog Talk Radio. The Boston Red franchise is still there. The others have moved on, as they say. So that is where we are in the scheme of things. Let me just get to ESPN here, and we'll get the NBA scores from last night. As we cover sport, we'll be back with the Monday morning quarter. Oh, what am I doing here? This is the Monday morning quarterback. Sorry about that. Talk about sometimes doing too many presentations, but this is actually the Monday morning quarterback. So we'll get that. We'll get it right here. We are quarterback, and we just talked about it. And been a long broadcast. Let's just say that this particular broadcast is over 45 minutes now. And we'll get the NHL up here. And as we wait for those scores to come up, we'll debut our All About Sports. That's the economics of sports. Shortly this week, in fact, the Magic were at the Celts. Magic 103-95 for the Celtics. The Knicks were at the Lakers. Lakers 127-107 for the Knickerbockers. The Nets and Pistons in Detroit. Nets win that one by 1 point, 101-100. And the Pacers and Spurs in San Antonio. Pacers won one there, 94-85. Oops. We hit soccer. We need to get the NHL in here. We will start covering soccer, incidentally. More World Football League. We'll get to those on our broadcast. But now let us get to the NHL. The Flyers were at the Capitals. Flyers 2-1 in that contest. The Canucks were shut out by the Jets. And The Rangers were at the Kings. Kings 4-2 in that contest. And the Golden Knights of Las Vegas, 5-1 over the Hurricanes and the Hurricanes of Carolina. They'd be of Florida. Anyway, the Sharks and the Ducks. Sharks 6-2 over the Ducks. The San Jose Sharks and the Anaheim Ducks. Well, it can't get any better than that. That's about as... I don't know if there was any men's basketball last night or not. We'll see quickly here if there was indeed any out there. We'll keep our eye on this. And there was. Virginia was at Wake Forest. Virginia 59-49. The Rutgers was at Michigan, number 23 Michigan. Michigan 62-47 over Rutgers. And the University of Miami was at North Carolina. North Carolina used to be a hellacious basketball school. But nonetheless, number 25, the University of Miami, 86-81 there. So do it for sports, and we'll do it for us. Have a good week ahead to everyone. And on some of these networks or outlets, you will get the whole production, which is around 50-something minutes. And on others, you will get less. We'll talk to you next week on the Monday Morning Quarterback. And we'll be coming with coverage from the World Economic Forum. You'll find that on a number of our network appendages here, let's say, from Boston Red on the World, because it's a world event, and numbers, man, and perhaps on the political side we'll have some of the other events. We're deciding what to do with DJ Trump if he shows up.